"Then replace me," she said quietly, and set down the ledger she had spent 3 years keeping and walked out of the room, and Tobias Marchmont, the fifth Duke of Wraxton, was fool enough to let her go, believing that he could. He had not meant to be cruel. That was the part he would return to, in the long unraveling months that followed, that he had not meant it, that he had spoken carelessly, in the offhand way a man speaks of a thing he has ceased to notice, never dreaming the words would cost him everything. Miss Verity Ashford had come to Wraxton 4 years before as companion to his ailing mother, and when his mother died she had simply stayed quietly, indispensably, without anyone quite deciding that she should. She had taken up the household books. She had managed the servants, soothed the tenants, remembered the tradesmen's names and the state of the roof, and the day the coal was due. She had made the great cold house at Wraxton run so smoothly that Tobias had entirely forgotten it did not run itself. And that morning, when the vicar's wife had made some arch remark about the impropriety of an unmarried young woman keeping a bachelor duke's house, and had suggested that a proper housekeeper of mature years would be more seemly, Tobias, irritated, distracted, thinking of a dozen other things, had answered without looking up from his newspaper. "Perhaps you are right. Miss Ashford is only a temporary arrangement in any case, a convenience. I dare say I could replace her easily enough with someone more suitable if it comes to that." A convenience. Someone more suitable. He had not even meant it. It was the sort of thing a man says to end a tiresome conversation. But Verity Ashford had been standing in the doorway with the household ledger in her hands, and she had heard every word. She did not weep. She did not reproach him. She crossed the room and set the ledger down upon his desk with great care, opened to the day's accounts in her neat and faultless hand, and she said, in a voice that did not shake, "Then replace me, your grace. You will find everything in order. The Michaelmas rents are entered, the household books are balanced to the shilling, and I have left a memorandum of what remains to be done before the winter. I would not wish to leave you inconvenienced." A pause. "I had thought in 4 years I had become something more to this house than a convenience. I see that I was mistaken. It was a natural mistake, and it is mine to bear, not yours to answer for. I wish you very well, my lord. I hope your replacement suits you." And she walked out. Tobias sat with his newspaper for a full minute after the door closed, faintly annoyed, expecting her to return once her temper had cooled. She did not return. By evening he was informed that Miss Ashford had packed a single trunk, declined the offer of the carriage, and gone on the public coach to her sister's house in a market town 40 miles distant. She had left no direction beyond that. She had taken nothing that was not her own. She had left upon his desk the ledger, the memorandum, and the household keys. He told himself it was of no consequence. He was wrong, and he began to learn how wrong within the week. It is a curious thing, how a house reveals what it has depended upon only by its absence. The new housekeeper he engaged was mature and respectable and suitable in every particular, exactly as the vicar's wife had recommended, and she was utterly, hopelessly at sea. She did not know that the east chimney smoked unless the flue was left ajar. She did not know that old Coombe the gardener would not take an order unless it was framed as a request, nor that the widow Preston's rent was to be quietly overlooked in the bad months, nor that the second dairymaid was slow but honest and must be corrected gently. She did not know 100 small things that Verity Ashford had known, and had never troubled anyone with, and had simply attended to, silently, for 4 years. The house that had run like a well-oiled clock began, within a fortnight, to grind. The tenants who had brought their troubles to Miss Ashford found the Duke himself unapproachable and the new housekeeper bewildered and grew sullen. A leak went unmentioned and rotted a ceiling. The accounts, kept now by a steward who charged 3 times the wages for half the cents, fell into confusion. And the house grew cold, not merely in temperature, though the fires were laid wrong now too, but cold in the way a house is cold when the person who loved it has gone. Tobias noticed the cold before he understood its cause. He would come into a room expecting he could not have said what. A low voice going over the accounts. a quiet figure at the writing desk who looked up when he entered and told him, dryly and without deference, exactly what he needed to know. He had grown so used to Verity Ashford's presence that he had ceased to perceive it, the way a man ceases to perceive his own heartbeat, and now that it had stopped, the silence was deafening. He missed her voice. He missed being told the truth without flattery, which she alone in all his household had dared to offer him. He missed the particular quality of her attention, the sense, which he had never named while he had it, of being cared for by someone who expected nothing in return. He would begin to say something to her a dozen times a day and remember, with a small cold shock, that there was no one there to say it to. It was in the third month that he admitted the truth to himself, sitting alone before a fire that had been laid wrong and smoked, with the confused accounts spread before him and the great house silent around him. He did not miss a convenience. He did not miss a housekeeper. He missed Verity. He had never once in 4 years allowed himself to look at her as a man looks at a woman he might love. She was in his employ. She was beneath his notice. She was simply there. And now that she was gone he understood, with the terrible clarity of a thing seen too late, that the steady contentment of his days had been her doing, that he had been happy without knowing he was happy, and that he had thrown it away with 6 careless words to end a conversation. He tried at first to replace her, as he had so airily promised he could. He engaged a second housekeeper and a third. He raised the steward's authority and then dismissed him. He did everything a duke's money could do, and none of it answered because the thing he had lost had never been a set of duties that could be hired for wages. It had been a person. It had been her. In the 4th month, Tobias Marchmont did a thing no Duke of Wraxton had done in living memory. He gave up. He gave up the pretense that he could carry on without her, gave up his pride, gave up the comfortable fiction that a man in his position did not go chasing after a companion who had walked out on him. He learned the name of the market town. He ordered his own horse, not the carriage, for he found he could not bear to sit in state on such an errand, and he rode the 40 miles himself in a plain coat, arriving mud-spattered and travel-worn at the door of a modest house in a modest street, and knocked and waited, hat in hand, like any ordinary suppliant. Verity opened the door herself. She was thinner, he thought, and plainly dressed, and there was a wariness in her face when she saw him, but she was composed as she had always been composed, and she did not slam the door, though he half expected her to. "Your Grace," she said, "this is unexpected. Is something amiss at Wraxton?" "Everything," Tobias said. "Everything is amiss at Wraxton, Miss Ashford, and it has all of it been amiss since the morning I was fool enough to call you a convenience. I have come to tell you so, and to ask your pardon, and to beg, for I find I am reduced to begging, and I discover I do not mind that you will come home." She did not answer at once. "You have engaged a new housekeeper, I understood," she said. "Someone more suitable. I hope she has settled in." "She has not," Tobias said. "Nor the one after her, nor the one after that. The chimney smokes. The tenants are sullen, a ceiling has fallen, the accounts are a shambles, and the house is cold, Verity cold in a way no fire can mend, because the person who made it a home has gone, and I did not know until she was gone that a home was what she had made." He drew a breath. "But I have not ridden 40 miles to complain of my chimneys. I could hire a mason for those. I have ridden 40 miles because I cannot replace you, and I have stopped trying, and I have understood at last what I ought to have understood years ago, that I did not lose a servant when you left. I lost the best thing in my life. I lost the woman I love." Verity went very still. Some color came and went in her face. "You must not say that," she said low, "if you do not mean it. I bore being called a convenience, my lord. I could not bear to be offered kindness out of mere inconvenience, to be asked back because your household is in disarray and dressed up as affection. I would rather keep house for strangers all my life than be a duke's second choice, taken up again because the first arrangement proved awkward." "You are not my second choice," Tobias said. "You are the only choice I have ever wished to make, and I was too blind and too proud and too comfortable to make it while I could. Verity, hear me. I do not want a housekeeper. I have tried 3, and I would try 30, and not one of them is you. I do not want the ledgers kept and the chimneys drawing. I want the woman who told me the truth when no one else dared, who managed my whole world so quietly I forgot it needed managing, who I woke every morning glad to see and never once had the sense to say so. I have come to ask you not to keep my house but to share it. Not as a companion, not as a convenience, as my wife, if you will have a foolish man who learned the worth of you only by losing you. The word wife hung in the air between them. Your wife, Verity repeated, as though she could not quite have heard it. Your Grace, I am a gentleman's daughter with no fortune and no connections. I was your mother's paid companion, the whole county would say. The whole county, said Tobias, may say precisely what it likes, and I shall not trouble to listen, having lately discovered that listening to the county's opinions of what is suitable cost me the only thing I valued. It was the vicar's wife's talk of suitability that put those wretched words in my mouth in the first place. I am done with suitable. I want you. I have ridden 40 miles in a bad coat to say so, and I will ride 40 more, and 40 after that every week for the rest of my life if that is what it takes to convince you that I mean it. He stepped closer, hat still in his hands. You told me to replace you, Verity. I have tried with all the resources at my command, and I cannot. You are irreplaceable. It has taken me 4 months and a fallen ceiling and a very cold house to learn it, and I am ashamed it took so long. But I know it now past any doubting. Come home, not to serve me, to be loved by me plainly and openly and for the rest of our lives as I should have loved you from the first. Verity Ashford, who had walked out of Wraxton with her composure intact and her heart in pieces, and who had spent 4 hard months in a narrow house building a life that did not depend on any man's regard, looked at the Duke of Wraxton standing mud-spattered on her sister's step, humbled as she had never imagined a duke could be humbled, and found that the wariness in her was giving way, at last, to something she had schooled herself sternly against feeling. You wounded me a great deal, she said, and her voice was not quite steady now. More than you knew. I loved that house. I think I loved you, though I never let myself say the word because it seemed a hopeless and improper thing to love. And to be called a convenience, to learn that 4 years of my heart's whole care had been, to you, a mere arrangement. I know, Tobias said. I know, and I shall spend the rest of my life unsaying it. Give me the chance. That is all I ask. Let me prove that I know now exactly what you are worth. I let you walk out of one room because I was fool enough to think you replaceable. I will not make that mistake twice if I live to be 100. For a long moment Verity looked at him, and then, slowly, she stepped back and opened the door wide. You had better come in then, she said, out of the cold. You are wet through and you have ridden 40 miles, and it would be a poor beginning to let you take a chill on the doorstep. A ghost of her old dry humor touched her mouth, and beneath it at last something bright and unguarded. We have a great deal to discuss, Tobias, and I warn you if I come back to Wraxton, I shall go on telling you the truth whether you wish to hear it or not. I do not know how to be anything but honest with you. It appears I never did. It is the only thing I have ever wanted, he said, and the thing I was too great a fool to see. Tell me the truth to the end of my days. Begin now if you like. The truth, said Verity, taking his cold hand in both of hers, is that I never wanted to go. Come in, my love, come home. They were married that summer at Wraxton, quietly, in the small church, where the tenants she had cared for crowded the pews to see the woman who had kept their troubles become their duchess. The chimneys were mended and the ceiling repaired, but the great change in the house was not one any mason could have wrought. It grew warm again, in the way a house is warm when the person who loves it has come home. Tobias Marchmont never again mistook the quiet, steady care of a good woman for a convenience, nor confused what was suitable with what was precious. He had made that error once, and paid for it with 4 of the coldest months of his life, and he was not a man who needed the same lesson twice. To the end of his days, when some visitor admiringly remarked how smoothly the great house at Wraxton ran, the Duke would set down whatever was in his hand and find his wife across the room. It runs, he would say, because she loves it and me, and I very nearly lost the both of us by not seeing what was before my eyes. I told her once to replace her. I could not. There is no replacing her. I thank God every day that she let a fool come home.